everything that we have discussed so far can be seen as a preparation for a further path. Preparation not in the sense that it's something basic or easy, as we have seen the ideals set before us in all that we have been exploring is quite high. And that for most people, that is our real aim, just to try to get close to that ideal. But it is good to know that there is what comes ahead, that there is another path that opens up once the person gets quite close to embody that ideal. And this in the theosophical literature is called the path of discipleship and the path of initiation. We are going to explore this. This is a difficult subject because it's the perfect kind of subject that the lower ego loves to talk about and to pursue and to try to get initiations and to have the label that you are higher than the rest. That's the quality of the lower ego. So this subject is many times misused, misinterpreted, and I think it is only safe to talk about this in the proper context. And we have had all these days in which we have laid out the ideals, the theosophical ideals that are related to service. If we are working on ourselves, it's because only thus we can help the world to be transformed. And only those people who get ready for this further path, and most importantly, who have the love of humanity in their hearts, only those people may be suitable for this path. So let's see what we are talking about.
Mahatmas and Masters of Wisdom. A Mahatma is a personage who, by special training and education, has evolved those higher faculties and has attained that spiritual knowledge which ordinary humanity will acquire after passing through numberless series of incarnations during the process of cosmic evolution. HPB.
So just as we have already developed several powers, intellectual powers, look at what we have done with the world, we have transformed the world. Of course, because we have not developed wisdom yet, many of our transformation is destructive or is not in the right direction. But animals are not able to transform the world the way we did and we are doing. And that is because we have awakened in ourselves this intellectual power and the ability to plan things that may have a huge impact over the whole planet. Now there are some other powers that are still latent in humanity. There are psychic and spiritual powers. Some people that doesn't or don't like the word power, and I think rightly so, because the lower self is always after power. And however, the idea of the power is something that allows you to do. Right now we cannot help humanity, we cannot help it as effectively as ideally we would want to, because we don't have the power to do so. We just are powerless to transform humanity. Of course we have some degree of power. We have power over ourselves, our own transformation, and we have some power to help people around us. Knowledge is power. So if we understand all these teachings deeply, we can help others in our daily life. We can help them understand life in a little deeper way. But if we had more power, we could help more. This only for those who have, as I said, the help of humanity in their hearts. Most people today that have some kind of power, they tend to use them in a self-centered way. If you are intelligent, what do you do with that intelligence? You try to follow a career and be successful so that you can have more money and have a better life. If you have money, what do you try to do with that? You try to get a comfortable life, to do everything you want, to acquire more things. If you have time, what do you do with that? Well, you try to use your time to have a good time and travel and do this or that. That's how humanity normally works. If you have a power, the instinctive action of a human being is to use that power for self-benefit. But when we start working in this path, we start seeing life in a different way. If I have any power, intelligence, ability to organize, some physical skill, time, money, we realize that we need to put that power for the service of others, to help people around in some way or the other. So the same with psychic powers and the same with spiritual powers. People who are not on this path, on the path of service, if they develop any psychic power, for example, they tend to use it in a self-centered way, either to promote themselves as special people, or as some kind of guru, or to charge for their services and get money, or the same pattern that we see in humanity. But a person who is walking the path of service, if that person has any kind of power, that power will naturally be used to help humanity. So there are psychic powers that have to do with the power of seeing other dimensions of the universe that we call clairvoyance, or the power to travel through other dimensions of the universe on subtle bodies, or many psychic powers which are just an extension of our physical powers. We can see the physical plane. There are subtler senses related to sight, so that we can see subtler planes. Or we can hear in the physical plane. There are subtle senses. We can extend the sense of hearing to subtle dimensions, so that we can hear things on the inner planes. We can travel physically. We can also travel astrally or in other ways. So the psychic powers are merely an extension of the physical powers, of the physical senses. They don't bring any particular wisdom. They don't bring any particular, they don't bring love or peace or harmony. You can be as selfish as you were before, having all these psychic powers. Or if you are wise and you have the psychic powers, you continue to be wise and you will use them in a wise way. The spiritual powers have to do with what we call love, compassion, peace, wisdom, joy. It is only when we tap on the spiritual nature, not the psychic nature. The psychic nature is like an intermediate nature between the physical and the spiritual. Psychism is not spiritual. Psychism is the physical, as I said, extended and made subtler. But through the psychic senses, we are still perceiving everything in terms of duality. We are always perceiving things through senses. And as long as you perceive things mediated by senses, that perception will be illusory, because you depend on how the senses, whether physical or psychic, how the senses show what is coming from the outside to your consciousness. So it's mediated, therefore it's conditioned. But the spiritual powers are powers that have to do with a sense of unity, in which you know something not because you perceive it from the outside. You know something because you become that. And that is the only certain knowledge. A Mahatma has developed all the physical, psychic, and spiritual powers to the greatest extent that is possible at this point in evolution. And they are the ones that can help humanity in the most effective way. They can help humanity to the root, to solve the root of the problem. Of course, they are not gods that can come and just by their willpower overcome and karma, overcome everything and just install a golden age. If that were possible, then all efforts, then the universe would be a joke, because all efforts would be useless. If there is an entity that can come and install a golden age, why would we make any effort? Why would we suffer? Would we suffer? Suffering would have no place in the universe if it would be possible, an alternative, to do something so that we are all enlightened without having to go through experience. So that is not possible, but the adepts are able to make the best out of the possibilities that are there in human evolution. So our aim is, or the aim of a person that becomes a disciple of the Masters, is to try to awaken as fast as possible all these powers so that they can become helpers in the work of the Masters, so that they can help humanity. This is what Michelle was talking about yesterday, about finishing your training and not just going on vacation that you well deserve, but staying there and helping others. So when a person gets to the level of an adept, that person there is nothing in the world that person needs or can learn from the world. That is over. That person has transcended anything that the world can offer. And yet they stay only to help. This is the only motivation that will attract the attention of a master to a person that is working earnestly in transforming himself or herself and helping the world.
The number of adepts who retain physical bodies in order to help the evolution of the world is but small, perhaps some 50 or 60 in all. But out of this, a still smaller proportion are willing, under certain conditions, to accept men as pupils or apprentices. And it is to these last, the smallest number, only that we give the name masters. Yet few though they be, their office is of incalculable importance, since without their aid, it would be impossible for man to enter the portals of initiation. Leadbeater.
So as Michelle explained last night, once a person gets to nirvana, meaning that person finished the human evolution, there is the option of renouncing to be absorbed in nirvana so that he can stay helping humanity. And there are two options: whether to remain invisibly helping humanity, that means without physical body or the lower principles as the Nirmanakayas, or to retain a physical body and work in the form of the Mahatmas or master, well, let's say the Mahatmas. And they retain a physical body because sometimes they have to act on the physical plane, as we saw Michelle explain. Saint Germain was involved in France in trying to produce the change that later on developed in the French Revolution. So they need a physical body, and they do other things. Now, Leadbeater says it's a very small number of enlightened beings that decide to retain a physical body, decide to be a Mahatma, and he says 50 or 60 there. Out of those Mahatmas, even a smaller number becomes what we call a master of wisdom, which means are willing to take on disciples. So it's a very small number of masters in the world that are willing to take on disciples. Because, as we are going to see, and Michelle explained last night, most of their work is done on the inner planes. To pay attention to the physical plane, to pay attention to people individually, and it's a kind of a waste of time unless that person is willing to become in turn a Mahatma so that he can help others. So we will see this.
The adepts are dealing with the entire world in enormous, comprehensive sweeps of power. They are influencing millions in their causal bodies or on the Buddhic plane, and all the time steadily, though by almost imperceptible degrees, raising the higher bodies of the people on a wholesale scale. They will not spend some of their energy on a pupil unless they have evidence that in a reasonable time he will add to the support of the world a strong current of strength and power in the right direction. They live to do the work of the logos of the system, and those of us who wish to draw near to them must learn to do likewise, and live only for the work. Leadbeater.
So in the first quote we see the Mahatmas are working, they are like nurses or nursing the souls of humanity. They are not working on the personality, they are working trying to help the souls themselves evolve. So that when the soul incarnates, it has more power to express itself and guide the personality. So that is the plane on which the Mahatmas work for the most part. And if you read the Mahatma letters, they are very careful how they use the energy. They say energy is something that doesn't belong to anybody, it's a universal resource, and it is our responsibility to use the energy in the best possible way. They are very careful, they don't waste any energy on anything. So they only pay attention to people if that will be a good investment, let's say. If these people, that attention will result in this person becoming another adept that will reproduce, this kind of energy. So the New Age idea that the adepts are doing nothing, it seems they are hanging on the higher plane, on the astral plane, waiting for some channels there just to say, you are all nice, you are all great, you are all, spiritual people, without any real teaching behind. You have to love, you have to be good. I mean, we know all that. That is not really in tune with the theosophical view of an adept. They are very busy, as Michelle gave this quote that the Master KH says, I'm so busy, constantly working on the inner planes. They don't have time to be just hanging around there and waiting for channels. So what they normally do is they will pay attention only to those people who are ready to enter this path, to become adepts. And that is quite a high requirement. All that we have been discussing up to here, this idea is what we need in order to be ready to enter in this path.
They work on the plane through two kinds of agents, direct and indirect. Any person sincere and unselfish, working in the line of the Master's work, may receive their inspiration even if they do not know it. Their direct agents are their accepted disciples, who work consciously with the Masters. Clericod.
So there are two ways of working with the Masters. Any of us and any person in humanity that is working for the good of humanity, they come into the, let's say, magnetic attraction or field of the work of the Masters, and we can be inspired by the Masters. We can be inspired by the influences that come from the Master. So it is perfectly fine to keep the Masters always in mind, to do the work for the Masters, to be devoted to the Master, because we actually, anybody, whether he or she knows it or not, if it is doing something for the good of humanity, will be inspired by this influence of the Masters. This is part of their work. Part of their work is to pour out this inspiration that people who are in tune with their work can draw from. And then we can grow faster because we are under this powerful influence. Of course, it always depends on us. In India there is this idea of the grace of the guru. And some gurus, many times just to manipulate disciples, they will say, I can transform you, you don't have to do anything. With my grace I will do everything for you. I think originally it has a good, there is a truth behind that. The truth that if you submit your personal will, it is the divine will that will take care of your life. But the way that this is put by some pseudo-gurus is that they are not really asking the person to submit their personal will in a spiritual sense, They are just saying, you stay being what you are, and I will grant you everything you want as long as you are my devotee, and my grace will take care of everything. So there is a grace. Some more serious gurus, they would say the grace is always flowing, but who is there to accept it? It's not just a question of the guru sending the grace or not. It is a question of whether the disciple is able to accept the grace. So the masters are constantly pouring out this influence. It depends on us whether we come within that field of influence or we step outside of it. And what will determine it is the degree of unselfishness and love and our intention to help other people. And then the other relationship is a more direct one, that is the one that we are going to explore, where there is a personal relationship between the master and the disciple.
Discipleship. This philosophy recognizes two paths, both having the same end, a glorified immortality. The one is a steady, natural path of progress through moral effort and practice of virtues. A natural, coherent, and sure growth of the soul is the result. A position of firm equilibrium is reached and maintained, which cannot be overthrown or shaken by any unexpected assault. It is the normal method followed by the vast mass of humanity. The other road, the precipitous path of occultism, through a series of initiations, only a few specially organized and peculiar natures are fit for this path. T. Subaro.
So this, again, was explained by Michelle yesterday. You have this path around the mountain, which is the one that most humanity follows, and including us. And there is the possibility at some point in the evolution of the soul, there may be the possibility of starting the straight up the mountain path, which is the occult path. By following the yoga of theosophy that we have been describing, that is still part of the going around the mountain. But it is a going around the mountain, training ourselves for an eventual possibility of beginning to go straight up the side of the mountain. The idea is that, again, why would you want to go straight up the mountain? It is because you realize that in order to help humanity, you have to be beyond the need of help. So you want to do that as fast as possible, not because you are ambitious and you want to be free as fast as possible or win any kind of race, but because the sooner you are beyond the need of help, the sooner you can help humanity. Now, the path around the mountain is stable, is constant, is not dangerous, but if you start going up the mountain, you can fall, you will hurt your hands, your feet will hurt, it's a far harder path, and it's far more dangerous. So the occult path, as we are going to see, it is a dangerous path. For the personality, not necessarily for the soul, but the personality, we have in the history of the early TS, the master said, these people, they pushed to become disciples. They were not really ready for that, but they generated a karmic cause that we had to accept them, even when we told them, you are not ready, and they failed. Some became crazy, some even, killed themselves. There is a lot of pressure, and this is why the masters only approach a person that has already done all the work that we have been explaining so far. It's a person that is very mature, very stable, very much in control of the lower nature. Only then it is safe to enter the occult path.
Occult progress, growth along this path, is affected by the adept directing through the cella various occult forces, which enable him to obtain prematurely, so to speak, a knowledge of his spiritual nature, and to obtain powers which he is not morally entitled by degree of his progress. Under these circumstances, it may happen that the cella loses his moral balance and falls into the Dugpa path. Subaro.
So this is like if you want to go through university in 1 year, that means that you have to make a far greater effort than if you want to go through 4 years. You know, some people, when thinking of this and hearing that there is this path that you can reach liberation faster, they think that there is no price to pay for that. Of course, I want to be on that path and get liberation fast, but there is a price to pay for that. It's not that anybody will grant you anything that you know will make this your evolution easier. On the contrary, obviously, to go through university in 1 year is far harder than going through it in 4 or 5 years. And this is the nature of the occult path. The occult path, in the occult path, the master will start sending energies and challenges and pressures on the consciousness of the disciple. It's more or less like the idea of alchemy. You know, in alchemy, if you want to turn the lead into gold, you put the lead there, you put a lid on the alembic, on this vessel, you put the fire below, and you don't let the pressure go out. And that fire and that pressure begins to transform the lead into gold. So this is something quite similar. The consciousness of the disciple begins to be under the pressure of certain energies that will produce the transmutation. But then the disciple has to have the strength to sustain this. And many do in the history of occultism, and some don't. And if they don't, it's not that they go to hell or anything. You know, the soul, just that personality, you know, is not good any longer. But then the soul can incarnate in the next personality and do whatever preparation the soul needs and try again in the future.
But this path is eminently dangerous to those who do not hold the talisman which ensures safety. This talisman is a perfectly unselfish, self-forgetting, self-annihilating devotion to the religious good of mankind, a self-abnegation which is not temporal, but must have no end forever, and the object of which is the religious enlightenment of the human race. It is therefore wiser not to speak the path It is therefore wiser not to seek the path of chelaship. If the man is fit for it, his karma will lead him to it imperceptibly and infallibly. For the path of occultism seeks the chela and will not fail to find him when the fit man presents himself. Subaro.
So that is our ideal should be to work on, to try to get closer to the ideas that we have discussed these four days in the past. To work for humanity, to work for the masters who are working for humanity, but not to become a disciple, not to get an initiation. Those things will come to the soul when the time is right, if that soul is seeking to become a helper of humanity. There are many people who may have a lot of wisdom, a lot of power, a very pure life, but because they are seeking their own liberation, the masters are not going to interfere with them, but they are not going to help them. If you are on your own path, going up the mountain, the masters are not going to help you if your aim is just to get liberation. It is only those people who are doing it to be part of the work of the masters that will receive the attention. As Michelle said yesterday, whether you go through the path of occultism or through the path around the mountain, you will get equally to the same top of the mountain. In one way, you will get there by yourself, relatively by yourself, because religious teachers are always coming to help humanity in a general way. But let's say you will get to the top by yourself and it will take, a long time. Or with the help of a master, you will get to the top of the mountain faster, but through far more exertion. So a person may be very pure, very wise, but if he is seeking his own heaven, nirvana, moksha, he will never meet the masters in that sense. And that's fine. It's not that every person is meant to meet a master of wisdom. I mean, a person may meet many gurus and masters along the way, but not these masters of wisdom or these masters of the occult path. And you see that Subaros says there, the talisman is this complete self-forgetting, self-annihilating, self-abnegation for the benefit of humanity. The disciple has to become an impersonal force for the benefit of humanity. As we say, I know that the idea of impersonal scares many people, but when you start really touching the impersonal states of consciousness that we talked about yesterday, you realize that the impersonal is far better, so to say, than the personal. That in the impersonal is the true life. In the personal, there is imprisoned life. So the disciple has to become an impersonal force of nature, where he's really working for the greater good. Whether that greater good brings personal pleasure or personal difficulties, that's irrelevant.
Qualifications for discipleship. The man who aspires to approach the masters can reach them only by making himself unselfish, as they are unselfish, by learning to forget the personal self, and by devoting himself wholly to the service of humanity as they do. He should obviously make efforts along two particular lines: the development of his own character and the undertaking of definite work for others. Leadbeater.
So this is what we have been talking. We get closer to this path by working seriously on ourselves and by working for others. Those two things have to be there. Just working for others without trying to transcend our own weaknesses is not enough. And working on ourselves without working for others is not enough for this path. Both things have to be there. So let's see now the typical qualifications of a person that is ready to be accepted as a disciple are described, for example, in At the Feet of the Master. So I want to go in the first session here in the morning very briefly through those qualifications and see more or less what kind of person is a person that is fit to become a disciple.
Number 1, Viveka, discernment. The first of these qualifications is discrimination, and this is usually taken as the discrimination between the real and the unreal, which leads men to enter the path. It is this, but it is also much more, and it is to be practiced, not only at the beginning of the path, but at every step of it, every day, until the end.
So, Viveka is a kind of wisdom that all the training that we have been exploring in the past days begin to produce. This kind of wisdom in which we can differentiate what is real and what is unreal, not only in a metaphysical and cosmic way, but in our everyday life. You realize what kind of thoughts and feelings are unreal, are based on an illusion, are based on a mistake, what kind of tendencies are based on a wrong perception of yourself, of life, and what kind of actions go to the side of love, what kind of actions go not to the side of love. So it's this kind of discernment or discrimination, which is not necessarily mental. Many times we have to think about, what's the right action, but there is a need for this insight that shows you what the right way or what the right action is. And then before we become disciples, we need to develop to some extent this wisdom. Because when the challenges begin to be subtler and deeper, if the person has not this kind of wisdom that can show him where he's going wrong, where something is not the way it should be, then mistakes and faults may come. Again, in the path of the disciple, there will be many mistakes, there will be many faults. As long as the disciple is trying to do the best, that is part of the training. Failing is never a problem, if the intention was the right one. And the intention, may be pure and the means may be wrong, but if the real intention is right, the mistake will produce some karmic effect, but the karmic effect will have the aim of teaching the soul better. If we do the best we can and we fail, it's not a fault. It's just that constitutionally we couldn't do any better. But that falling is what will bring further strength, further ability to the soul because of the effort that the soul did. There is this book by Mabel Collins, the Blossom and the Fruit, or The Fruit and the Blossom. It's a novel, the history of a black magician that now is making efforts to come back to the right side. And it was a woman, and she says at some part when she can understand something, she says, I wonder what kind of suffering purified my eyes so that I can see now. And that is the idea that the difficulties, the suffering, the challenge purifies the eyes of the soul and allows you next time to try in a better way.
Vairagya, desirelessness or detachment. There are some who forsake the pursuit of earthly aims only in order to gain heaven or to attain personal liberation from rebirth. Into this error you must not fall. Remember that all selfish desire binds, however high may it be its object. And until you have And until you have got rid of it, you are not wholly free to devote yourself to the work of the Master.
So this is something common. At the beginning we may lose some desires for the physical objects, but then now we desire virtues or peace or happiness for us to enjoy it. And that is a higher kind of desire. It has a place in the process of purification of desire, as we saw. But the person that is fit to be a disciple has to be beyond even that. That person gets to a point where he or she is not thinking any longer about himself. It has come to some point of balance where desires are more than desires, they are preferences. If you ask a person, that person may prefer one outcome or the other, may prefer one action or the other, but it's just a preference. And if things don't go that way, it's not a big deal. If that cannot be attained, it's not a big deal. That person got to a point of balance where there is this inner satisfaction that doesn't depend on external things. So that is where vairagya, or what vairagya means. It means that point of equanimity. So a person that may become a disciple needs to come to that place. As we saw that this is a high aim in the yoga of theosophy for us, but eventually we will find one day that we are there, or that we are very close to that. And that one day, maybe in this lifetime, maybe in a future lifetime, it doesn't matter. The idea is that once the person gets to that place, then this qualification is attained. Of course, none of these qualifications have to be perfectly gotten, otherwise the disciple would be an adept already. But they have to be developed to a good extent, because these are the protection for the disciple in the path of initiation, where all this pressure will start coming.
Shatsampatti, right living.
There are 6 qualities or 6 attitudes that the disciple should have in daily life. And again, these things, this is a description of how a person that is at this level naturally displays, or how this person lives in daily life. For us, they may be ideals, and we can work trying to move towards that ideal. But for the person that is here, this is how the person lives. So the first one is there.
Shama, Control of mind, serenity. Control of the mind itself, so that the thought may always be calm and unruffled, and through the mind of the nerves, so that they may be as little irritable as possible. Avoid the incessant worry over little things in which many people spend most of their time. Whatever you are doing, fix your thought upon it, that it may be perfectly done. Do not let your mind be idle, but keep good thoughts always in the background, ready to come forward the moment it is free.
So these are a few descriptions of that calm mind, a mind that is not constantly worrying about everything, that it doesn't get engaged in all the trivialities of life, not because you are not dealing with people or life, but because the disciple doesn't get engaged in all the, if we can say, the stupidities that our mind creates. We create so many things that really have no base on anything. We create our worries, we create our desires, we create and that's normal. I'm not being judgmental, but it's just a description of how we live. So the more you approach this, the clearer you see how we create all that. It's not easy to get out of it. And by this I'm not meaning that we are foolish in doing this. This is the nature of the mind. And the yoga theosophy that we describe is the training that will take us to this, to having a calm mind that avoids to get entangled in all this constant, restlessness, that is able to focus on whatever it's doing, not wasting time, not wasting energy, because the adept is exactly that. It's a focused energy working in the best possible way. And this is therefore part of what the disciple has to attain to a certain extent.
Dama, control of action, restraint of senses. If your thought is what it should be, you will have little trouble with your action. Yet remember that, to be useful to mankind, thought must result in action. There must be no laziness, but constant activity in good work. But it must be your own duty that you do. You should undertake no new worldly duties, but those which you have already taken upon you. You must perfectly fulfill all clear and reasonable duties which you yourself recognize, that is, not imaginary duties which others try to impose on you.
So this is for a disciple, a person that is ready to become a disciple. Like his or her job is to work for the betterment of humanity. So the master says do not take any new worldly duty, because obviously in the occult path you have to be absolutely responsible for whatever you are engaged in. So the master says, whatever duties you already have, you need to fulfill them in the best possible way. There are articles where the master says, no person would be accepted as a disciple if that person has to desert his wife or her husband or the family. If somebody depends on you and you say, well, this doesn't allow me to be a disciple, I will run away, that in itself shows that that person is not fit to be a disciple. We have to fulfill a person that is the right action is the most important thing in the occult path. So if you have a rightful duty, that person has to fulfill that. And only when karma releases you from that duty, then you may be freer to do other things. But what the master says there, this being so, then avoid taking other worldly duties that will keep you, then you have to be really responsible for that. Again, for most of us, we may not be at this point, so it's not that we should refuse from taking worldly duties, because those duties may be our way of service in the world. But as you are getting closer to that, then things change, and then this becomes important in that sense.
Uparari, tolerance, unbiased action. You must feel perfect tolerance for all and a hearty interest in the beliefs of those of another religion, just as much as your own. For their religion is a path to the highest, just as yours is. And to help all, you must understand all. But in order to gain this perfect tolerance, you must yourself first be free from bigotry and superstition.
So another important aspect of a disciple is the ability to find truth wherever it is. Not to say my path is the only path, or to be unable to see how other approaches are also important. Now, this doesn't mean that everything under the sun is true. And there are in religions, in spiritual movements, a lot of things that are not true. A lot of things that are either honest mistakes or they are produced by an attempt at manipulating or getting something out of people. So there are many things that are not true. And the discernment of the disciple, that is the first qualification, includes to see what is true and what is wrong or not true in your own thinking, in your own tradition, in the tradition of others, but that has to be in the context of a mind that is sincerely able to appreciate truth wherever it is. So the disciple is an unbiased person, a penetrating person, in the sense that a penetrating intelligence, not intellectuality. It's not that the disciple has to be intellectual, but this wisdom is a wisdom that allows you to see this is not a right approach. That has to be there in the context also of a capacity to see truth anywhere and to see the falseness in your own traditions too. So it's an unbiased mind.
Titiksha, cheerfulness, patient endurance, equanimity. The Master teaches that it does not matter in the least what happens to a man from the outside. Sorrows, troubles, sicknesses, losses. All these must be as nothing to him and must not be allowed to affect the calmness of his mind. They are the result of past actions, and when they come, you must bear them cheerfully, remembering that all evil is transitory, and that your duty is to remain always joyous and serene. They belong to your previous lives, not to this. You cannot alter them, so it is useless to trouble about them.
These qualifications are present also in Vedanta. Shankaracharya describes them, for example, and in the school of Vaita Vedanta they are used. Some interpretations of Titiksha are very extreme in our views. For example, they would say Titiksha implies never to try to solve any problem, because trying to solve a problem that comes to you is a resistance to what is coming. If you truly believe that karma will bring you exactly what you need, you should never try to solve the problem in the sense of the trying to solve it to escape from it, to escape from the results. So there are these stories. A monk, a Buddhist monk, a woman comes and says, this is your son, we were together and this is your son, and I cannot take care of him, so you have to take care of him. And the monk received the kid, and of course he was repudiated from his community. How could you do that? You couldn't even look at women because that's the rule, and you had a kid. And he left the monastery, he raised the kid, and then a few years later the woman came back and said, it was not true, but I couldn't raise my kid. Now that you raised him, I want the kid back. And the monk would give the kid back and go back to the monastery. And of course that is a quite extreme example, but shows the attitude that if you can develop a devotion to the wisdom that is behind everything that happens, the deeper that devotion that you can generate, and the more detached your attitude about what happens, then the easier it will be to go through this path, because this path implies the working out of karma that was generated in many lifetimes in the past, that still will keep us from being free to help the master. So we need to work out all these karmic causes. In one of the letters, I think was one of the letters or in some other philosophical literature, it is said that the disciple may work out in one lifetime the karma that people normally work out in 100 lives.
Again, Besant said that.
Yeah, Annie Besant says that. So the idea is that during the period of discipleship, especially during the period of probation, as we are going to see in the second session, there are challenges that will start coming one after the other, because those challenges are to free oneself from past karma, to train oneself, to develop strength. So you see that this person that is ready to face all these challenges has to be a person that is close to all these ideas, so that he or she is able to handle all this. So the yoga theosophy, the first part that we have discussed in these past days, is a preparation to be able to enter in this path and to have the strength, the wisdom, the detachment, the calmness necessary for this.
You must bear your karma cheerfully, whatever it may be, taking it as an honor that suffering comes to you, because it shows that the lords of karma think you are worth helping. Remember that you are of but little use to the master until your evil karma is worked out and you are free. By offering yourself to him, you have asked that your karma may be hurried, and so now in 1 or 2 lives you work through what otherwise might have been spread over 100.
Okay, so this is the source of the quote. But I think Annie Besant also mentions that, because I had that too in mind. So the idea in the theosophical view is that all laws of nature are mediated by some kind of intelligence. So the law of karma is mediated by these celestial beings that we call the lords of karma. Now, the intelligence of the lords of karma, they are not like a human being up there, with a tablet recording. I mean, that's all an allegory. We tend to think, when we think of God, we think that God is an extension of the kind of intelligence we have. So that God has the same feelings as we do. It gets angry, it gets jealous, it loves a group, it doesn't love the other. We have to be careful not to project our concept of intelligence upon these celestial beings. But the idea is that there is some kind of intelligence that is organizing how karma works out. When a person calls the attention of this intelligence, of this law, then the karma of that person begins to be rearranged in a specific way, so that karma can help us a more accelerated course or training. So this is what the feet of the master says. When this is happening, we should try to keep this sense of gratefulness, in the sense that recognizing that this is the opportunity that we are being given to grow. And even without getting or coming to the extreme of a disciple, in the daily life of any of us, when we are earnest about learning, we will see this effect to some extent, to the extent that we can handle it. So we have to remember that the difficulties that come in our way, the people that we have to deal with, the situations that we find ourselves into, instead of trying to escape from them, to blame, this is like this because this person is doing that, we need to see that from a higher perspective and know that all this is being rearranged by a far higher wisdom with a very specific purpose. So that is, I think, what they mean by saying we have to face life or the karma cheerfully. Not in the sense that you are laughing, oh, how hard life is, and you laugh and you are joyful about that. But in the sense that inwardly you recognize this fact, and there is a part of you that says, this is hard, but it's okay, I understand, I have to go through this.
Samadhana. One-pointedness. One-pointedness means that nothing shall ever turn you from the path upon which you have entered, for you yourself must become one with the path. It must be so much part of your nature that you follow it without needing to think of it and cannot turn aside.
So while we are doing the preliminary training, we feel all this tension. You realize that you should do the right thing, but then there are all these tendencies that are pulling you to do something else, and we have this struggle, which is all natural and part of the training. But the person that is fit to be a disciple is a person in which that, for the most part, ceased. Not that there are no struggles any longer, but there are no struggles in the sense that there is no other option, there is no other path or other way to go. This is what you are. You act in this way and you go in this direction because there is no other option. This is because during the preliminary training, most of the opposing elements that come from these elemental lives have been dealt with. So now there may be many struggles and difficulties, but not in the sense of whether I should do the right thing or not, whether you may be still struggling to do the right thing, but there is no question about it. So that's something that is necessary for the person who is ready to be a disciple.
Shraddha, confidence. You must trust your master. You must trust yourself. You say you know yourself too well. You know only the weak outer husk, which has fallen often into the mire. But the real you is a spark of God's own fire, and God, who is almighty, is in you. And because of that, there is nothing that you cannot do if you will.
So this is also very important, and again, a qualification to be a disciple. Confidence in two ways. That confidence that we were talking about, that there is an order behind life, that is a far higher wisdom than ours, that is setting the situations, the confidence that the master is there and sending you all these things. And the other is the self-confidence. Self-confidence can never arise if it is based on the personal self. You see some people that are the leaders of their fields, scientists or artists or presidents, and they still lack self-confidence. Many of the things they do is as a result of going after things that will make them feel good with themselves. Self-confidence can never come at the level of the personal self, because the personal self, in essence, is a mistake. So if we try to get to come to this place of self-confidence by trying to feel good with ourselves on a personal level, we will always be chasing something that cannot be attained. Of course, that doesn't mean that we should feel bad about the personality. But the point is that the self-confidence comes as we identify more and more with this divine spark. It is only the person that can identify himself or herself with the inner self that shows true self-confidence. Trying to search this self-confidence through what we call self-love and all this is impossible. Again, don't go to the other extreme. I'm not meaning that we should be harsh on the personality. Self-love is many times necessary for a person because that person has a kind of self-loathing. So you need not to be in any of the extremes. But self-confidence will never come by concentrating on the personality. So all the training that we discussed takes our consciousness little by little beyond the personal self. And that is when self-confidence comes. And then you know that no matter how many times you fail, you know that eventually it is a law, you will succeed. So you have a problem, you try to deal with it the best way you can, you fail, and that doesn't make a dent on you, because you know that is a process. And immediately you say, the next time I'll do it better. And the next time comes, and you fail again, and that doesn't produce a dent, because you know, well, I may fail 5 times, 50 times, but you know that at some point you will succeed. That is the true self-confidence that the disciple needs. So these 6 points were the points of right conduct, and the way, the daily attitude. And the last point is traditionally translated as desire for liberation. It's a mumukshutva, desire for liberation. But in At the Feet of the Master, they say this translation is misleading because it may be self-centered. You want to free yourself out of what? Out of love for humanity. So, of course, you want to be free from the limitations, free from suffering, free from this, because only then you can help. So the Master, instead of translating this as desire for liberation, he translates this as love.
Of all the qualifications, love is the most important, for if it is strong enough in a man, it forces him to acquire all the rest, and all the rest without it would never be sufficient. It is indeed the will to be one with God, not in order that you may escape from weariness and suffering, but in order that you may act with him and as he does. In daily life, this means 2 things. First, that you shall be careful to do no hurt to any living thing. Second, that you shall always be watching for an opportunity to help.
So, even in St. Paul, the idea, if I don't have love and have all these gifts from the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, then I'm nothing. The main idea, we all do this out of love. Now, love, unfortunately, is not a good word, because when we talk about love, we talk about personal love. Most of us think of romantic love, or the love that you have for your kids. That the love as we know it is like a flame that is covered with smoke. The essence of that love is true love, but it is obscured by personal elements. So, you love your kids, and you may not love the kid of the neighbor so much because it's not yours. Now, if suddenly you find out that this is your kid, that somehow, something happened, this now is your kid, now you love that kid all of a sudden because it's yours. So you can see how the love is true, but the conditioning around, the exclusiveness around, all that comes from personal elements. And Ibesan was going through a really hard time when he was trying to help people, especially the poor people, to learn methods of birth control so that they wouldn't have 20 kids and half of them would die starved. And the Society of England at the time and the church thought that was immoral, and they told her, if you persist with this, you will lose the custody of your daughter, because she was divorced. And then Anibesan says, all the children are my children. I love dearly my daughter, but can I let all these children die to protect my attachment with my daughter? So she kept on, she kept working for this cause. She was put in jail, and certainly her daughter was removed from her. Both daughter and son later in life came back and worked with her and all that. But you can see how the real love that we are talking about is not personal attachment, it's not emotional gush, and love is the action that it may not even be a feeling. It depends. If you are more of an intellectual person, it appears less as a feeling. If you are more devotional, it may appear more as a feeling. But love is basically your earnest interest in helping, in offering, in bringing people towards something better. That is love, and not necessarily feeling that you want to become one with humanity. That may express itself in yourself, but if you don't feel that, it's not that you don't have love for humanity. It's what you do for humanity what matters. So that's the end of it. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah.
If you get an illness or something wrong with the body and you take steps to heal it, that's not contradicting karma?
Yeah, I don't know what the absolute answer is. This is what the way that I try to take these things. So many times if the illness doesn't really need to be treated, sometimes we have something that doesn't really need, that it will go away by itself. I tend not to try to pay too much attention to it. Now, if that becomes an obstacle for my work, then I may try to, and I'm not putting myself as an example, by saying what I do is, this is the only answer that I know. I don't know the absolute answer. This is what I do. I don't know if it is right or wrong. But if it interferes with my work, then I may try to take care of it. But I mean, I'm not very focused on what happens to the body in particular. But I guess that's also because, in general, the body that I got in this incarnation doesn't need a lot of things. So other bodies are different. There are people who have a body that they have to pay a lot of attention. Then, if it is a more serious illness, I think it's fine to try to address it. But why? Because only if you are healthy, or if you are healthy, you can help better. So if your life begins to be more focused on the common good, then yes, you want to be in the best possible state in order to be able to help. Now, in cases where there is nothing to be done, there are people that keep pushing and pushing in cases or situations where there is nothing to be done, that you just have to accept it or whatever the case. And I think that may be a waste of energy, a waste of effort. So maybe if there is something that is irreparable, and you try and you see that then you just accept it and make the best out of it. Now, I cannot say what the right attitude is for each person in different situations. Each one of us, that's part of developing this discernment. Each one of us has to find out what the right attitude is. But that is in the ideal of a person that is trying to become a beneficent force of nature. So for most people, it's right to try to cure their bodies. What is right or wrong is all relative to the stage in which we are at. Blavatsky said the adept and the disciples, even though they have power, they don't have the right to cure themselves. They cannot use the energies that they know they can manage to cure their bodies, because they would be misusing an energy that is universal. So she could do many things, precipitate things, cure people, and she would never cure herself. So if the master thought that it was good for the work to cure Blavatsky, then the master would do it. There is also in the Mahatma letters a story that is very enlightening in this way, that the master received a letter from Synod, and he opened it, got it out of the envelope, read a few lines and said, okay, I'll read it later, and he put it in a little bag that he was carrying, but he says, I was doing some other work, while I was walking, so he said, I cannot do it now. He put it in the bag, but the letter actually fell. And he started walking, and suddenly he realizes that there was something wrong with the letter, so he turns, and there was a goat eating the letter. And he says, I was distraught, because then Sinner was going to feel offended that he didn't get an answer. He went and saw that the letter was, wasted. And he said, even though he can precipitate letters, because of many of these communications were with letters that he precipitated, and he wasn't going to do anything about it. And he said, and the Mahachohan appeared and said, don't worry, I'll take care of this, and brought the letter back into shape. And that is an example of something that the master could have very easily have fixed, but he has not the right to do that. But the Mahachohan thought that it was okay, and then he did it. And then Master KH says, as a show of my gratefulness to the goat, I fixed her poor teeth so that she could eat something better than just paper. Because he said this showed him that the Mahachohan was supporting the project of the Theosophical Society. At the beginning, the Master KH wanted to inspire the founding of the TS, and the other adepts said, well, you try and we'll see how humanity responds. They didn't get involved. But this KH said this showed that the Mahachohan was happy with how the project was going, and he came and helped in that way. So the question of health, and what to do depends on at what stage you are, but the more power you have, the less right you have to use it in a personal way.
I was just wondering if that applies to physical things like using aloe vera on burns and things like that. HPV talked about like mental healing versus physical healing. She said it is okay to try to cure illnesses by physical means, medicine or herbs and all that. She says to try to cure them through your mind, that is a far more dangerous thing, because she says an illness on the physical plane is the last chain or the last link in a chain of causes that come from the inner planes. So you may try to force the physical symptoms to disappear, but what you are doing is pushing back the causes, and the illness that you can cure physically by trying to using willpower or all that will rebound and produce some kind of psychological illness. So she was, and Besant and the Bitter, most theosophies were against the idea of mental healing. Now, energy healing is a little different. If in the energy healing, all you are trying to do is not to push the illness, but to bring some balance to the energy of the body. That is okay, because you are not really interfering with the karma. You are trying to help from the outside to gain some balance. But to try to use your willpower to eradicate the illness, she said that wasn't wise to do.
I just wanted to add, that goes that as above, so below. When my children were young, I read a lot of books about viruses and how to help them along. And what I came to know, and having 3 kids, is that if they get a fever and you give them something to lower the fever, then the illness takes longer to get through their body. There's a level of, there's a chemical called interferon that is produced in the body only when the temperature is raised, and that interferon is what fights viruses. And I also read that is why arthritis was so bad, was because we were getting colds and flus and these other viruses. We were taking aspirin to lower the fever, and what the viruses were actually doing was burning off substances or particles inside of our body. So now those substances were being deposited in our joints and causing arthritis. So what I found in my was, and I was like a nervous wreck, thinking my kid was going to die in the middle of the night of fever. But what happened inevitably is every time they got a fever, it would break about 3 a.m. And so the body was able to fight within 24 hours, which usually took 7 to 10 days if I treated it with fever reducers. So, and I would never recommend that for everybody, but for me that worked, and I really saw the difference that, and even read the articles, the scientific articles that said that suppressing these kind of things could cause more arthritis.
Yeah, not only that, but viruses cannot reproduce themselves in the temperature that the body has when it has a fever. So if you lower the fever, the viruses can reproduce faster. So that is a good example of how many times suppressing processes backfires. There is a reason. Of course, then that is the general rule. Then there are exceptions. If something is really wrong and the fever goes beyond certain limits,
Right.
you may need to do something, and because it's the least, bad thing. But generally speaking, processes have to be run or let run, and that is the healthier option.